The elevator doors seal shut, and the man's hand closes around Ella's wrist like he already owns it. "Do you know who I am?" His voice doesn't rise. It doesn't need to. Ella looks at the cufflinks first, engraved, heavier than anything she's ever touched, then at his face. Dark eyes, unblinking. A scar along one eyebrow that no one has bothered to mention to her in the staff orientation packet that lists every VIP by photograph and preference. She spits. It lands on his cheek, just below his left eye. Neither of them moves as it slides toward his jaw. The elevator hums between floors, the number panel counting upward in soft red light. His jaw tightens once, a small pulse under the skin, and he doesn't reach up to wipe it away. He watches her instead, like she's a variable he hadn't accounted for in an equation he thought he'd already solved. "No," Ella says. "And I don't care." His grip on her wrist doesn't loosen right away. His thumb moves once against the inside of her arm, testing her pulse maybe, or just cataloging the fact that it hasn't slowed. "You should. I've met men who thought their name was supposed to scare me. It never worked before." She pulls her wrist free when his fingers finally ease, and the skin underneath still holds the shape of his hand, warm, almost branded. It's not going to start now. The doors open on the lobby before he can answer, and she walks out first, chin up, spine straight, willing her legs not to shake until she's out of his sight line. If you think that's the last time Ella crosses a man she should be terrified of, follow now, because what happens next puts her in his path for good. Ella has replayed it 4 times by the time she's sitting outside the HR office, and every time she still feels the satisfaction of it more than the fear. That should worry her. It doesn't, not yet. She keeps circling back to the way his face hadn't changed even as spit slid down it. Like he'd trained himself out of every reaction that gives a person away. The woman behind the desk, Ms. Han, laminate name tag, mouth already pinched with secondhand dread, doesn't look up when she says, "Sit." Ella sits. Her uniform still smells like bleach, and the lavender polish they use on the marble in the East Wing. Her hands are steady in her lap, though her knee bounces once before she presses it still. She's rehearsing the version of this where she apologizes just enough to keep her visa sponsorship intact and not one syllable more, when Miss Han's phone rings, and Miss Han goes so pale answering it that Ella actually leans forward to see if she's about to faint. "Yes, sir. Right away, sir." Miss Han sets the phone down like it's made of glass. She looks at Ella the way people look at something they don't have a name for yet. "You're being transferred," she says. "Effective this afternoon." Ella waits for the rest. The part where transferred means escorted out, means her final check mailed to an address she'll have vacated by the time it arrives. Instead, Ms. Han slides a new badge across the desk. Executive floor, Ella's photo, her name, a clearance level she didn't have this morning. Transferred where? Up. Ms. Han doesn't elaborate. Her hands are shaking slightly as she stacks papers that don't need stacking, straightening the same corner 3 times. "Mr. Yu requested you specifically." The name means nothing to Ella. She turns the badge over, half expecting a mistake. A different Ella Morgan employed somewhere in the building's endless staff roster. The photo is hers. The floor number is real. The plastic is still warm from the printer. "I spat on a guest," Ella says, mostly to see if saying it out loud changes anything. "In the north elevator, an hour ago." "I know." Ms. Han's eyes flick to the door, to the hallway beyond it, like she's checking for something. "I was told to process the transfer regardless." Ella's pulse ticks up despite herself. In her experience, powerful men who get spat on do not respond by handing out promotions. They respond by making sure you never work in this city again, and if her father taught her anything before the collapse took his name along with everything else, it's that men like that have long memories and longer reach. Regardless of what, Ms. Han finally looks at her properly, and there's something close to pity in it. Of the spitting, the word lands strange in the too bright office, and for a second Ella almost laughs, except nothing about Ms. Han's face suggests this is funny. She folds her hands over the badge instead, feeling the corners dig into her palm. Amara is waiting by the staff lockers when Ella comes down, badge clutched so tight the edges bite into her palm. "You're still employed," Amara says, incredulous, already reaching for the badge to inspect it herself. "I heard you told off a guest in the elevator. I heard he had to have his jacket steamed. I didn't tell him off." Ella pulls the badge back before Amara can turn it over. "I spat on him." Amara's mouth opens and stays that way for a full 3 seconds, her hand frozen halfway to her own locker door. "And they're moving you up?" "Executive floor. Starting today." Ella says it like it's someone else's life, because it feels like it is. Her fingers find the raised lettering on the badge, tracing it without meaning to. "You." She doesn't know the surname, doesn't know the face behind the title stamped under it, only the weight of a hand around her wrist, and a voice that didn't need to get louder to make the whole elevator car feel smaller. "Do you even know who Mr. Yu is?" Amara's voice drops, glancing once toward the doorway like the walls themselves might be listening. "No." "Should I?" Amara doesn't answer right away, and that non-answer says more than anything she could put into words. "Just be careful," she finally says, closing her locker with more force than it needs. People who get noticed by that floor don't usually get to choose what happens next. She tells herself this is a mistake that will correct itself by morning. She tells herself the same thing standing in front of the private elevator 40 minutes later, new badge pressed to the sensor, watching the panel light up floors she's never been cleared to clean. Her reflection in the brushed steel doors looks steadier than she feels. She thinks about calling her father before she goes up, phone already halfway out of her pocket, and then puts it away again. He worries enough from across an ocean without her adding a story about spitting on a stranger who turned out to own the building. Some things are easier to explain after they've already resolved themselves one way or another. The doors open on the executive floor, and it's quiet in a way the rest of the hotel never is. No cartwheels, no vacuum hum, no low murmur of guests complaining about thread counts. Just long carpet swallowing her footsteps, and a hallway that seems to hold its breath around her, gold light pooling from recessed fixtures overhead, doors shut on either side like a row of closed mouths. At the far end, a door stands open. A man's shadow falls across the threshold, unmoving, waiting for her to walk into it. Ella stops 6 feet from the door because her body decides for her, before her mind agrees to it. Through the gap she can see a desk the size of her old bedroom, a window wall over Seoul at dusk, city lights just beginning to flicker on below, and him, standing with his back to her, jacket gone, sleeves rolled to the forearms braced against the sill like he's holding the building up by will alone. "Close it behind you," he says, without turning. She doesn't move. He turns then, unhurried, and studies her the way a buyer studies something he hasn't decided the value of yet. The mark under his eye is gone now, whatever remained of it scrubbed away, but his gaze lands on her mouth for half a second too long, before it moves back to her eyes, like he's checking the memory against the reality. "You're not going to apologize," he says. "It isn't a question." "No. Every person on staff at the Citadel," he says, stepping closer, "has apologized to me at least once. For breathing near me wrong. For refilling my water glass before I finished it." His voice stays level, almost conversational, which makes the words land harder. "You spat on me and told me you didn't care who I was. I still don't. I know." Something in his mouth almost curves, gone before it becomes a smile. "That's the only reason you're standing here, instead of on a plane back to Lagos." Her stomach drops at the mention of Lagos, at how easily he says it, like he's already read a file on her that she's never seen. Her hands curl at her sides, nails pressing crescents into her palms. "You looked me up. I own the hotel you clean. I own most of the buildings on this street." He rounds the desk, close enough now that she can smell cedar and something sharper underneath it, and Ella's pulse thuds hard enough that she's sure he can see it at her throat. Looking people up is not a hobby. It's a habit. Yuji Hyuk. That's supposed to mean something to me. It will. He says it without threat, which somehow makes it worse. Ms. Morgan, you'll report to this floor starting tomorrow. Executive liaison. Triple your current wage. Because I spat on you. Because you're the first person in 4 years who looked at me and didn't flinch. He says it flatly, like a fact he's still deciding what to do with. And for a second, the room goes tight around both of them, his eyes not leaving her face, her breath caught somewhere behind her ribs. People flinch around you a lot then. You have no idea. He finally breaks the stare, moving back toward the window, and for the first time she notices the tension across his shoulders, the way he holds himself like a man bracing for weather that hasn't arrived yet. This isn't a reward, if that's what you're waiting for me to admit. It's a decision. I don't undo decisions. And if I refuse, you won't. He says it without arrogance, only certainty, like he's already accounted for every version of this conversation, and this is the one he expects to win. Your father's medical costs, your sister's school fees, your rent, 3 weeks late as of yesterday. He watches the words land, watches her jaw tighten, and something in his face flickers, not triumph, closer to discomfort at his own reach, gone before she can be sure she saw it. I'm not threatening you. I'm telling you why you'll say yes. Ella's throat works once before she trusts herself to speak. You had no right to look into any of that. No, he agrees. I didn't. I did it anyway. The stretch of quiet between them is long enough to hear the building's climate system humming somewhere behind the walls. Ella breaks it first, because staying quiet feels like losing. Fine. Executive liaison. But I don't answer to you outside of work hours, and I don't owe you gratitude for a job I could have had without the theater in the elevator. Understood. He turns back to the window, dismissing her without another word, and it's the dismissal more than anything he's said that makes her hands curl at her sides on the walkout. She doesn't see him again until the door has shut behind her and the private elevator is already descending, and only then does she let herself breathe like she's been drowning the last 10 minutes without noticing. Her reflection in the elevator door looks like someone else entirely, someone who just agreed to something she doesn't fully understand yet. 3 days into the new job, Ella learns the executive floor has its own hierarchy of fear. Junior staff go quiet when Ji-hyuk passes. Senior staff go quieter, eyes dropping to their screens a half second before he rounds the corner, like they've trained themselves to sense him coming. But nothing prepares her for the way the entire floor seems to hold its breath. The morning chairman Bak Sung-min steps out of the private elevator. He's smaller than she expects, silver-haired, moving through the hallway like a man greeting old friends at a garden party, pausing to touch shoulders, to ask after children by name. He stops in front of Ella's desk before she can find a reason to be elsewhere, and up close, his eyes are sharper than his smile lets on, cataloging her face, her posture, the pen she's holding a fraction too tightly. You're new, he says, warm, grandfatherly, terrifying in a way she can't yet name. Morgan, that's an English name. My father's, Ella says, careful, keeping her voice level. And your father is retired, she says, which is the polite word for what happened to him. From construction. She says it fast, hoping the word will close the door she feels opening. Bayek's smile doesn't move, but something behind his eyes sharpens, files through a decade of memory in under 2 seconds. Morgan Construction, Lagos. He says the name of the company like he's tasting something he remembers fondly. I believe I met your father once, years ago, at a trade conference in Busan. Sharp man, good instincts for contracts, terrible instincts for partners. His voice stays gentle, almost fond. A shame. What happened to that company? Ella's fingers go still on the keyboard, the cursor blinking uselessly on a half-finished line. She said nothing about the collapse, nothing about Lagos beyond the surname, and yet he's already 3 steps ahead of her, walking a path she didn't know was lit. I don't know what you mean. Of course you don't. Biek pats the desk once, satisfied, and moves on toward Ji-hyuk's office like the exchange never happened, whistling faintly under his breath. Ji-hyuk is standing in his doorway by the time Baek reaches it, and Ella watches, because she can't make herself stop watching, as his hand comes down on the back of a chair, hard enough that his knuckles go white before he catches himself and lets go, flexing his fingers once, like he's shaking off a cramp instead of a reaction. "Chairman," Ji-hyuk says, even, controlled, nothing in his voice betraying the hand that was just gripping wood like it owed him something. Ji-hyuk. Baek claps him on the shoulder, familiar, proprietary, the gesture of a man who's never once doubted his welcome. "Your new liaison has good instincts, doesn't scare easily." His eyes cut back toward Ella for half a second, and it feels like being weighed on a scale she can't see the numbers of. "I like that in someone who works this close to you." "She's efficient," Ji-hyuk says, flat, giving nothing away. "That's the only reason she's here." "Of course it is." Baek's smile widens fractionally, the kind of smile that suggests he believes the opposite, and finds it amusing that Ji-hyuk thinks he doesn't. "Efficiency. Well, keep her efficient then." The office door shuts. Ella sits at her desk with her hands flat against the surface to keep them from shaking, replaying the way Baek said Morgan Construction, like it was a memory he enjoyed returning to, and the way Ji-hyuk's knuckles had gone white before either of them said a single word about it. She types 3 sentences of a report and deletes all 3, unable to make the letters mean anything with her pulse still hammering against her collarbone. When she finally looks up, Ji-hyuk is watching her through the crack in his office door, and for once he doesn't look away first. Hae-won arrives on the executive floor the following week, wearing a coat that draws every eye in the hallway toward her, without her needing to acknowledge a single one of them, and Ella clocks the way conversation dies around her, the same way it dies around Baek. She moves like someone who has never once had to knock before entering a room she considers hers. She doesn't introduce herself. She doesn't have to. The ring on her hand does that for her, and the way she walks into Ji-hyuk's office without knocking confirms the rest. Ella isn't supposed to be in the adjoining supply room when their voices start climbing through the wall, but she is. Restocking printer paper she doesn't actually need restocked, and she doesn't move. "You gave her a title," Hae-won says, low, controlled in the particular way of someone who's spent years practicing control until it stopped feeling like practice. "A liaison position. For staff who spat on you. That's not your concern. Everything that touches your reputation is my concern. That's what this arrangement is." A held breath in her voice, the kind that comes before a decision rather than after one. "My uncle doesn't share what's his." Ji-hyuk. "He's already asking questions about her. He mentioned her father's company to me over dinner last night like it was gossip. Then he can ask me. He will." Her heels click once, twice, toward the door. "He always does. And you know exactly how those conversations end for the people standing too close to you when they happen. Ask your last assistant. Ask his family, if you can find them." The door opens before Ella can retreat, and Hae-won walks past her without so much as a glance, perfume and cold air trailing behind her, heels clicking down the hallway until the sound fades into the hum of the building. Ella stands frozen in the doorway of the supply room until Ji-hyuk's voice, quiet, reaches her from his office. "You heard that." It isn't a question. Ella steps into view, rather than pretend otherwise, arms crossed over the ream of paper she's still holding for no reason. "Enough of it. She's not what you think." He says it without turning from the window, shoulders set in a way that looks less like defense and more like exhaustion, the kind that doesn't come from one bad conversation, but from years of them stacked on top of each other. The engagement isn't a marriage. It's a leash her uncle put on me years ago, and I haven't found the length of chain I need to cut it yet. That's not my business. "No," he turns then, and crosses the room faster than she expects, close enough that she can see the muscle ticking along his jaw again, and this time his hand finds hers, fingers closing loosely around her wrist in an echo of the elevator. except gentle now, asking instead of taking. His thumb brushes once over the same spot his grip had marked days earlier, like he's trying to erase what the first touch left behind. Ella pulls back before she can stop herself, putting the width of the doorway between them, her wrist still warm where his fingers had been. "Don't, Ella. I have work," she says, and walks away before her hand can betray her by reaching back, though she feels the pull of it the entire length of the hallway, an ache low in her chest she refuses to name. She doesn't sleep well that night. She lies awake replaying the sound of Haywan's voice through the wall, the words leash and reputation, and ask his family if you can find them circling each other until they blur into something closer to a warning than an argument. Ella still doesn't know the file waiting for her 3 doors down will change everything. Drop a comment on who you think is really pulling the strings here, then keep going, because Chapter 5 is where it all unravels. It's supposed to be a simple errand, filing quarterly reports in the archive room down the hall from Ji-hyuk's office, the kind of task that requires no thought at all. Ella almost misses it. Her hand is halfway through a drawer of shell company records, alphabetized by a filing system she doesn't fully understand yet, dust catching in the light from the single high window, when a name stops her cold. Morgan Construction, Lagos, Asset Transfer, Sungwoo Holdings. Her hand freezes over the folder like the paper itself has gone hot under her fingers. She knows Sungwoo. Everyone on the executive floor knows Sungwoo. It's one of a dozen shell entities that route quietly back to Bakek's family, the kind of company that exists only on paper, only to make other companies disappear into it. She's heard staff mention the name in passing, the way people mention weather, background noise to a system she was never meant to notice, filed between routine budget lines and expense reports like it was nothing at all. Her fingers shake, pulling the file free, papers sliding loose before she catches them against her chest. Reports, transfer agreements, a signature page near the back with 2 sets of initials at the bottom, one she recognizes instantly as Bakek's looping scrawl, bold and unbothered. The other is Ji-hyuk's. She stares at it long enough that the letters blur, waiting for them to rearrange into something less damning, something that isn't her father's ruined company sitting in a folder 3 doors down from the man who's been reaching for her hand like he has any right to it. Her breath goes shallow, chest tight enough that she has to consciously remind herself to exhale. Footsteps sound in the hallway, brisk, approaching. Ella shoves the folder into her bag without deciding to, without letting herself think through what she's about to do with it, papers crumpling against the lining. By the time Ji-hyuk's assistant rounds the corner asking if she needs help finding anything, Ella's already smiling, already saying no, already walking toward the elevator with her father's name burning a hole through the canvas at her side, her pulse hammering loud enough that she's sure the assistant must hear it too. The elevator doors close around her reflection, and she doesn't recognize the woman looking back, jaw set, eyes bright with something closer to fury than fear, a stranger's name folded into her bag like a blade she hasn't decided yet whether to use. She doesn't go back to her desk. She walks the long way to the stairwell instead, taking the steps 2 at a time, needing the burn in her legs to match the one climbing up her throat, and by the time she reaches the ground floor, her hands have finally stopped shaking, replaced by something colder and far more certain. She waits until his penthouse, until the door shuts, and it's only the 2 of them, and the skyline behind floor-to-ceiling glass, city lights scattered gold beneath them, before she drops the folder onto the table between them, the sound of it landing louder than she means it to be. "Explain this." Ji-hyuk looks down at it, and something in his face goes very still, very controlled. The same stillness she's learned means he's calculating faster than he's speaking. He doesn't reach for it. He doesn't need to. His eyes find the signature page without opening the folder, like he already knows exactly which line will be showing. "Where did you find that? Does it matter?" Ella's voice comes out steadier than she feels, steadier than her hands, which she keeps flat against the table to stop them shaking. "Your initials are on my father's company. Sungwoo Holdings took everything he built, and folded it into nothing, and you signed off on it. I signed a transfer agreement 8 years ago for a shell entity I didn't fully understand the reach of yet. His jaw works once, a muscle jumping beneath the skin. I didn't know your father's name meant anything until Belkek said it out loud on this floor. That's supposed to help me? No. He finally looks up, and there's nothing performed in his face now. None of the calm he wears like a second jacket. It's supposed to be the truth. I've spent 2 months trying to find a way to take that company apart without taking your father's case down with it. I didn't tell you, because I didn't know how to say it without you looking at me, exactly like you're looking at me right now. Ella's chest goes tight, breath shallow, the folder between them suddenly heavier than paper has any right to be. Her eyes sting, and she blinks hard against it, refusing to let this be the thing that breaks her composure in front of him. You could have told me the day I found out who you were, and you would have walked into that transfer file the same day, with half the information and none of the protection I've spent 2 months building. His voice doesn't rise, but something under it does. Raw in a way she hasn't heard from him yet, his hands braced flat against the table's edge, like he needs the surface to stay upright. I am not the man who ruined your father. I am the only person positioned to help you take apart the one who did. You expect me to trust that. After this, she taps the folder once, the sound sharp in the quiet room. No, he shakes his head slowly. I expect you to be furious. I expect you to leave here tonight, not believing a word I say. I only need you to still be standing in front of me tomorrow, when I can prove it. And how exactly do you plan to prove anything to me right now? I don't, not tonight. He exhales, the first crack of frustration she's seen in him showing at the edges. Tonight, I just need you to hear me, before you decide I'm the same as him. Ella picks the folder back up, hands still not steady, and steps toward the door. I need to think. Ella, his voice stops her with her hand already on the door. Whatever you do with that file, do it because you decided it, not because you're running from me. She doesn't answer. She doesn't trust her voice to hold if she tries, and she pulls the door shut behind her before he can see exactly how close it comes to breaking anyway. The elevator ride down feels longer than any she's taken in this building, each floor ticking past in silence broken only by her own uneven breathing. The folder clutched against her chest like something that might still burn her if she loosens her grip. Beck finds her 3 days later in the executive floor's private lounge, alone, like he timed it, the late afternoon light slanting gold through the windows behind him. You found the file, he says, settling into the chair across from her without invitation, still wearing that grandfather's smile, unhurried, entirely at ease. I know because Ji-hyuk's been unbearable all week. That's how I know he's protecting something. Ella's spine goes rigid, her hands stilling around the cup she'd been holding. What do you want? To be honest with you, for once, since no one else in this building seems inclined to be, Beck folds his hands, patient, pleased with himself in a way that makes Ella's skin crawl. I've known who you were since your first day. Morgan's daughter, cleaning suites in my hotel. I arranged the coincidences myself, the elevator, the transfer, all of it, to see how far Ji-hyuk would go to protect someone with no name and no money. Consider it a loyalty test. The room tilts slightly around her, the cup trembling in her grip until she sets it down to keep from spilling it. Every moment she'd believed was chance, his obsession, the promotion, the late nights he spent trying to shield her from a company she hadn't known existed, had been choreographed by the very man who ruined her father in the first place. Why? Because a man who breaks rules for a maid is a man who'll break rules for less, eventually, and I like to know exactly how far my business partners bend before they snap. Beck stands, smooths his jacket, entirely unbothered, like he's just finished discussing the weather. He passed the test, for what it's worth. Longer than I expected. That should mean something to you. Even now. You destroyed my father to test him. I destroyed your father because he made a poor business decision 15 years before Ji-hyuk ever met you. The two events are unrelated. Bake says it so plainly, so without apology, that for a moment Ella can't find any words at all. There's a gala Friday night. The whole board will be there. I'd come, if I were you. I suspect it will answer every question you still have. Why would you tell me any of this? Why not just let it stay buried? Because buried things have a way of costing more the longer you leave them in the ground, Miss Morgan. Back pauses at the door, glancing back once. And because I find you interesting. I'd hate for you to spend the rest of your life wondering whether any of this was real. He leaves before she can ask anything else. Footsteps unhurried down the hallway, and Ella sits with her pulse hammering, replaying every gentle thing Ji-hyuk has done for her, against the sudden, sick knowledge that Baek had been watching the whole time, moving pieces neither of them knew they were. Her hands don't stop shaking until long after he's gone, and even then, only barely. She spends that night staring at her ceiling, turning the word test over and over, until it stops sounding like a word, and starts sounding like an accusation she can't decide whether to aim at Baek or at herself. Forever believing any of it had been simple. The gala fills the Siddell's grand ballroom with more light than Ella has ever seen in one room. Chandeliers throwing gold across a floor crowded with the same board members who go quiet whenever Ji-hyuk walks past them. Ella stands near the back in a dress Amara insisted she borrow, the file from the archive room folded inside her clutch, waiting for a moment she isn't sure will come. Ji-hyuk finds her before Baek does. His hand brushes hers, brief, questioning, and this time she doesn't pull away. I'm ending it tonight, he says, quiet enough that only she can hear it over the string quartet. The engagement, the silence around what he did to your father, all of it. He'll destroy you. He can try. Something steady settles into his face, the calm she first mistook for coldness, now looking more like resolve, his shoulders squared in a way she hasn't seen from him before, deliberate rather than defensive. I'd rather lose the board than lose the only person who ever looked at me and told me the truth. Ji-hyuk. Whatever happens after tonight, he says, cutting gently across her, I need you to know none of it was a test. Not for me. He told me everything. The elevator, the transfer, all of it arranged. Her voice wavers despite herself. How do I know you're not just better at hiding what you want than he is? You don't. Not yet. His hand tightens once around hers, grounding rather than pulling. But watch what I do in the next 10 minutes, and then decide. He crosses the ballroom before she can stop him, taps a glass until the room quiets, 300 faces turning toward him at once. He speaks without notes, without hesitation, laying out Sungwoo Holdings and Morgan Construction and Baek's signature across a decade of ruined companies in a voice that doesn't waver once, each sentence landing like a door closing somewhere in the room. Haewon's hand goes to her throat, the ring on her finger catching the chandelier light as she takes an unconscious step back from Baek's side. Baek's smile finally breaks, the warmth draining out of his face all at once, leaving something colder and older underneath it. You're making a mistake, Baek says low, only for Ji-hyuk, though half the room can read it on his face regardless. I already made it. 8 years ago. Ji-hyuk doesn't lower his voice to match. Tonight I'm just telling everyone. By the time security walks Baek out of his own gala, the board has already turned on him in the particular, brutal way boards turn on men the instant they stop being useful. Phones lit up across the room, whispered calls already being placed before Baek reaches the door. Calls are made before midnight. By morning, 3 separate outlets are running the story of Morgan Construction's collapse, and the paper trail leading back to Baek Sung-min, and Ella's father, an ocean away, is on the phone with a lawyer for the first time in 8 years, his voice on the recording Ella listens to, twice steadier than she's heard it in years, his name finally being spoken in public as something other than a cautionary tale. Ella finds Ji-hyuk on the terrace afterward, tie loosened, the city spread out gold and endless behind him, the noise of the ballroom fading to a low hum through the glass doors. Your board just watched you end their chairman's career for a woman who used to clean their offices, she says. Our chairman, Ji-hyuk corrects, and reaches for her hand again. No hesitation in it this time, no question, and she lets him take it, lets her fingers close around his in front of the same glass wall that once made her feel so small. My father is going to want to meet the man who signed away his company, Ella says, before he finds out that same man just gave it back to him. Then he should meet me soon. Ji-hyuk's mouth finally does what it's been threatening to do since the elevator, curves, fully, unguarded, as his hand tightens once around hers. I'm not going anywhere. Good. Ella steps closer, close enough to feel the warmth of him through the cooling night air. Because I'm done running from anything you sign your name to. Even the parts that used to terrify you. Especially those. She lets herself smile, the first full one she's given him since the elevator, and something in his face eases like a held breath finally released. Below them, Seoul keeps moving, indifferent to the war that just ended 11 floors above its streets, and for the first time since she spat in a stranger's face, and changed both their lives, Ella lets herself believe that whatever comes next, she won't be facing it alone. If Ella and Ji-hyuk earned this ending, let us know in the comments, and follow for more stories where the wrong man spits fire and the right one burns everything down to keep her.